Yesterday, this man came here with another woman. He's your husband, isn't he?" The young widow was stunned. George, the husband who passed away 3 years ago, was not only the man Gabriela loved, but also her only anchor after a lifetime of loss. His sudden death in a traffic accident left a void in her heart that nothing could ever fill. Since then, every morning she wakes up feeling like she's living in a never-ending dream. The small apartment where they once shared so much happiness has now become a silent room filled with memories. On the table sits a cold cup of tea. On the sofa, the pillow George used to rest his head on while watching soccer. And on the wall, their wedding photo now like a deep cut separating reality from remembrance. Gabriela's mother, Mrs. Lewis, is the only one who comes by every day, bringing warm meals, kind words, and a fragile hope that her daughter will slowly heal. But those words of comfort, though spoken with love, have unintentionally become a burden. It's been almost a month since George left us. "You can't keep blaming yourself, sweetheart. It's not your fault, Gabi." But to Gabriela, those words only made her feel like she was being pushed away from her own grief. Who could possibly understand the pain of waking up each day only to realize again that the person you love most is gone? At times she even wished she had gone with George that day. In one argument with her mother, she screamed through tears, "I wish I had died with him." Years of repressed sorrow began to take a toll on her body. Gabriela often felt dizzy, nauseous, and constantly exhausted. She had noticeably lost weight, her face pale as if each day she stayed alive was a battle against herself. She shut herself away in the apartment doors, locked phone, unanswered conversations avoided except with her mother and sometimes her younger sister, Amanda. But even Amanda made Gabriela feel judged, pressured to move on, while all Gabriela wanted was to grieve in silence in her own way. Then, one afternoon, after violently throwing up in the bathroom, Gabriela stood in front of the mirror, staring into her sunken, dark-ringed eyes. A thought flashed through her mind, one that both terrified and confused her. Could I be pregnant? In that moment, everything froze. All the endless sorrow seemed to be shaken by a flicker of hope, or perhaps a new storm on the horizon. Gabriela didn't know what to think, but she felt it deep in her bones. Her life was about to turn down a path she never expected. After the thought of being pregnant flashed through her mind, Gabriela couldn't find peace again. She walked out of the house, as if driven by instinct, and headed to the nearest pharmacy. In her pocket was a pregnancy test. In her heart, hundreds of unanswered questions. Back home, Gabriela shut the bathroom door tightly and sat silently beside the bathtub as the minute hand on the clock crept forward. Her hands trembled as she picked up the tiny test stick, such a small object, yet it held the power to change her entire life. And then, 2 lines appeared. Clear, undeniable. She gasped, cradled her belly, and tears rolled down her cheeks, not out of despair, but confusion, and something that felt like light. In that moment, Gabriela wasn't thinking about scandal or judgment, not even the future. She just knew there was a tiny life growing inside her, and no matter how shattered her world might be, she was no longer completely alone. But alongside that glimmer of hope came a storm of fears Gabriela couldn't ignore. She wasn't ready to tell her mother, and certainly not Amanda, who always dismissed Gabriela's feelings as weak or stubborn. She needed time. She needed understanding. But it seemed like no one around her was willing to give her either. And then fate brought Gabriela to another turning point. This time, not from emotion, but from truth. During a quick stop at the supermarket, she unexpectedly ran into Sevilla, a former colleague of George's. The look in Sevilla's eyes when she saw Gabriela wasn't just sympathy, it was evasive. Uneasy Sevilla. "Did you ever see my husband with someone else?" The question slipped from Gabriela's lips like a whisper. But Sevilla's reaction was stronger than she expected. The woman blushed, hesitated, and quickly turned away without answering. Gabriela's heart pounded. She knew instantly. Sevilla knew something. Could it be? Amanda was right. Could George, the perfect husband in her memory, have lived a double life? She remembered the words of the child in the cemetery. That innocent remark now felt like the final puzzle piece in a picture she had long refused to see. That night, Gabriela sat quietly on the sofa, clutching her wedding photo. Her tears wouldn't stop. No one had ever taught her how to love someone who was gone, let alone how to forgive him if he had betrayed her. George, if you really did something wrong, why can't I stop loving you? There was no answer. But one thing Gabriela knew for certain, she couldn't let doubt torment her forever. If not for herself, then for the child growing inside her. From a grieving wife, Gabriela was now stepping into the role of a mother, carrying a heart full of sorrow, but slowly learning how to be strong. She wasn't ready to speak the truth to her family yet, but she knew the day would come. And when it did, she would no longer be the Gabriela who collapsed under pain. For weeks afterward, Gabriela lived in a daze caught between doubt and the growing instinct of motherhood. She still wasn't ready to speak the truth. Every time her mother or sister called, she answered quickly, masking the tremble in her heart with a carefully indifferent tone. But the growing belly was a truth she couldn't hide forever. Each morning in front of the mirror, Gabriela saw a new chapter of her life forming, not only in the shape of the child inside her, but in her own reflection, a flicker of fear. Yes, but also something that looked a lot like hope. Finally, on her birthday, Gabriela made a decision. It was time to bring the truth out of the shadows. She invited the three most important women in her life, her mother, her sister, and her mother-in-law, for a meal at her apartment. She cleaned the place carefully, prepared some pastries, a little wine, and a few light dishes. But more than anything, she prepared herself. Gabriela told herself, no matter how they react, I will stay strong for the baby. For me, her mother, Mrs. Lewis, was the first to arrive. The moment she stepped inside, her eyes dropped to Gabriela's belly. The round curve beneath the loose dress could no longer be hidden. Gabi, why didn't you tell me? She stammered, her hands trembling with shock. Gabriela was silent for a few seconds, then gave a soft smile. The first in months, I wanted it to be a surprise. And I needed time to be ready. There was no judgment, no questionings. Lewis wrapped her arms around her daughter, tears streaming down her face. I'm happy for you. Truly, she whispered in Gabriela's ear, like a late blessing finally spoken aloud. But that gentle moment didn't last long. The next to arrive was her mother-in-law, Mrs. Harris. The moment she saw Gabriela's belly, she froze as if struck by lightning. Good Lord, you're pregnant. Please tell me this isn't real. This is George's child, Gabriela said softly, almost in a whisper. The words, instead of calming things, poured gasoline on the fire. Lies, George has been gone for 3 years? Do you think I'm stupid? You faked your grief just to get my sympathy? Mrs. Harris screamed, her voice sharp with pain and fury. Gabriela clutched her belly tightly, tears falling silently. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. You have every right to think whatever you want. But this is my child and George's. Whether you believe it or not, that's your choice. No one could stop Mrs. Harris's rage. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, throwing one final heavy accusation over her shoulder. I never want to see you again. Gabriela stood frozen in the now silent room, her hands cold and clasped tightly together, her breathing heavy. When Mrs. Lewis walked over and held her close, Gabriela leaned into her mother's shoulder and whispered, I knew this wouldn't be easy. Moments later, Amanda arrived. Her eyes widened the moment she saw her sister's belly. Gabi! Whose is it? George's silence, bone-chilling silence. Then Amanda sprang up like she'd been shocked. You've lost your mind. No husband, no job, no future. And now you want to raise a child alone? Gabriela didn't flinch. She looked at her sister with an almost eerie calm. If I have to be a mother in solitude, then I will be. Not because I'm perfect, but because this child is what's left of my life. After the door slammed shut behind Mrs. Harris, Gabriela stood frozen in place, surrounded by an apartment that suddenly felt empty. No more shouting, no more blame, no more judgmental eyes. Just her mother, and the child growing inside her. Though it hurt, Gabriela felt an oddly liberating sense of relief, like someone who had finally taken off a heavy suit of armor, not to fight, but simply to breathe. That night, she sat quietly with her mother in the small kitchen. They didn't talk much, just shared a cup of hot tea. Mrs. Lewis held her daughter's hand, gently brushing the cold skin as if trying to pass along a different kind of life, the life of trust. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Gabby, she said, her voice raspy but steady. As long as you know you're doing the right thing, I'll always be here. Those words sank into Gabriela like soft rain on parched earth, but she also knew not everyone felt the same way her mother did. In the days after that birthday dinner, both Amanda and Mrs. Harris cut off all contact. Gabriela's phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages, no one knocking at the door. The silence, which once had been a refuge for her grief, now felt like a heavy stone pressing down on her chest. Amanda didn't call her mother-in-law, of course never returned. Gabriela even overheard from a neighbor that Mrs. Harris had been telling people her daughter-in-law betrayed her late husband and was using his death to hide her guilt. Gabriela wanted to defend herself, to scream, "This is George's child, born of love, not shame," but she stayed silent. Because the more the child grew inside her, the more Gabriela began to understand what truly mattered. She didn't need others to believe her anymore. She only needed to believe in herself. That's why one morning, as sunlight streamed gently through the curtains, Gabriela decided to write a new chapter for her life. She opened her laptop and applied for a job at a nearby library, a dream she once had before life fell apart. She also scheduled her first prenatal appointment. Her finances were still uncertain, but Gabriela believed she would figure it out. Instead of turning to her mother for help for the first time, she went alone to shop for baby clothes, a few tiny outfits, a soft blanket, and a book for single mothers. As she paid at the register, Gabriela realized she was smiling a small smile, but a genuine one. Back home, she sent a short message to Amanda. "I don't blame you if you need time. I understand, but I will keep living, keep being a mother, and I'll love this baby with everything I have. My door will always be open." There was no reply. But Gabriela wasn't sad because for the first time she wasn't waiting. No one had taught her how to be a mother alone. No one had shown her how to love a child when the world only wanted to see a mistake. But Gabriela knew if she could love a man so deeply that she once wanted to die with him, then surely she could love a tiny life enough to live for it. Being alone now was no longer something to fear. It was a choice. Time passed quietly, week by week, month by month. Gabriela lived a simple life in her small apartment, working part-time at the neighborhood library and attending her prenatal checkups regularly. There were no more mornings drowned in tears, no more sleepless nights haunted by memories. Instead, there were gentle movements in her belly, the soft rhythm of a tiny heartbeat during the first ultrasound, and the strange, beautiful feeling of a soul growing out of a pain she once thought would never heal. Though she was still alone, Gabriela no longer felt empty. With each passing day, she became a little stronger. Every walk through the park, every page she read aloud to her baby still safe in her womb was like a quiet stitch mending a heart that had once shattered. Then, one winter morning with snow falling softly outside the balcony and Gabriela making tea in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. She was surprised visitors were rare at that hour, but when she opened the door, she froze. Standing there was Sevilla, George's former colleague, the woman who had avoided her questions at the supermarket months ago. "I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced, but there's something I can't keep to myself anymore," Sevilla said, her eyes full of sincere regret. Gabriela invited her in, heart pounding. For months she had tried to push aside the doubts, the unanswered questions, but now face to face with Sevilla, old fears came rushing back. They sat at the kitchen table in the pale morning light. Sevilla was silent for a long while, then said, "George came to the cemetery with me. I'm the woman that little boy mentioned." Gabriela clenched her hands together. Speechless, Sevilla continued, "I'm George's distant cousin. He never cheated on you, but he asked me to help prepare a surprise for you." Sevilla pulled out an old, slightly crumpled envelope with familiar handwriting on the front. "For Gabi, in case I never get the chance to say it. Gabriela's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was George's handwriting, a love letter that had never reached her. If you're reading this, it means, I never got to say this to you. I bought a small piece of land near the cemetery, the place you love for its quiet. I wanted us to build a little house there for our retirement, and if anything ever happens to me, I want you to keep living because you are stronger than you know. Gabriela broke down in tears, not from grief, but from release. George hadn't betrayed her. What remained of him in her heart was real. I stayed silent because I wasn't sure if you wanted to know, Sevilla whispered, but now I believe you deserve to know everything. Gabriela nodded, tears soaking the tablecloth. She touched her belly, the place where the child of that love was still growing peacefully. A few weeks later, Gabriela decided to write a letter by hand to her mother-in-law and Amanda. No explanations. No blame. Just an invitation. If one day you want to know the truth, come to me. I won't be angry, because I've chosen forgiveness. She didn't know if they would come, but that no longer mattered, because Gabriela was no longer the woman broken by sorrow, no longer someone waiting for someone else to rescue her from loneliness. She was a mother, a woman who had learned to rise right from the place she had once fallen, and above all, she now understood. True love sometimes finds its way back from the most unexpected places. Dear friends, there are pains that have no name, losses that no one can fully understand except the one who lives through them. But even in the deepest sorrow, there's always a flicker of light, small, fragile, yet enough to reignite hope. Gabriela's story isn't just about love, betrayal, or trust. It's about the journey to rediscover herself through heartbreak, through misunderstanding, through accusations that were never fair, because sometimes true strength doesn't come from proving what's right or wrong. It comes from the choice to keep loving, to keep living, even if it's on your own. If you're feeling alone, misunderstood, or standing at a crossroads no one else can see, please remember you are not alone, and you deserve a life filled with love in your own way. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment, share, and subscribe to support us and keep us motivated to create more videos. Thank you for listening, take care, and see you next time.